Good morning and namaste, everyone. Those who've joined live on this 50th episode of my show on Manage Better. Thank you very much for joining for this special episode. Before I get into the show, actually, I wanted to share that when I started this journey of LinkedIn Live and subsequently YouTube Live, I had the sole hope that maybe a few people will be able to join and I will be able to reach out and probably kill the extra time that I had during the pandemic. I, of course, didn't want to work too hard because, in case my employer got used to it, they will expect me to do that all the time. So, like many of you, I tried this LinkedIn Live thing. Little did I know that going live on LinkedIn and YouTube will soon become a part of who I am. People started recognizing me, and I started enjoying it. It hasn't given me any many money yet, but like most things, it has that you do as a profession or as a passion in this case, it has given me some kind of identity. The investment has been minimal, and if somebody had told me 2 years ago that by spending this much you will get a little bit more identity, I would have given 10 times that money. So in a way, I have carved this path a little bit. I won't say entirely because others had already walked this path, so I was following the path in that sense. But and along the way, it got me or it gave me access to a wonderful set of people through the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program, which I was a part of, the first cohort of about 200 people. And there again, like it has always been in my career, I found myself at the bottom of the class and started crawling up from the bottom of the class to somewhere at least in the middle. And I found friend, very generous shows. One such soul is my guest today on the 50th show that I have, and I wanted to wait a little bit for the show so that I could invite him for the show. You already know the guest, so I will not keep it too much of a suspense, but a little bit about him, and then we will get him into the show. But before that, I just quickly wanted to make sure that everybody on LinkedIn and YouTube who wanted to join are in. I can see that, yes, um, people are there already. Thank you very much. I can already also see that LinkedIn is working fine. So yeah, should be good. Okay, so before I invite Papa CJ, a little bit about him. Of course, world famous comedian. We all know that aspect of CJ's life. But he's also an executive coach. He's an author, published author. I will talk a little bit more about that. An MBA from Oxford, HBR published author. Not many can say that. Even in the corporate world, hardcore corporate world, people don't get to HBR, but CJ has been able to do that. And what I liked about his profile, of course, is simple description that, in his own words, I uplift others and help them to be the best version of themselves. For a comedian to say this, you will think that this is only through laughter, but it is also through other approaches that he has been able to use. He started his comedy career in London in 2004, and some 3,000 or 300 odd shows in a short 2-3 year span. He then returned to India, and I am sure he stopped counting, but certainly the shows are more than 2,000 in 25 plus countries, of which full houses at Broadway and Sydney Opera House. Many established entertainers, performers, most can't boast of this. And boasting is something that doesn't come to CJ at all. So you will quickly see that how humble and down to earth he is. He's an MBA from Oxford University, and in his words, he said that this has helped him con a few corporates into giving him corporate training assignments and a lot more. 50 plus, blue chip corporates have hired him for coaching and mostly training. And this is the book. I will get him to talk about this book a little bit later, appropriately titled Naked, and we will get into that a little bit more. Great person to know, and a very, very gracious and generous person with his time. Uh, you would have possibly, all those people on this show joining for free, you would have paid hundreds of dollars to join a Papa CJ show. So you can thank me later about that. With that, let me get the man himself into the stream. Thank you, CJ. Thank you very much. Welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I just want to tell the people who are watching that Anshuman said he started getting recognized a lot more because of the LinkedIn Live. So I asked him when was the last time this happened to you. So he said, "Oh, I met this lady, and she says, 'Oh, aren't you Anshuman Tiwari from LinkedIn?' He says, 'Of course, yes, I am.' She said, 'Well, then what are you doing in the women's washroom?' So
That lady is also on the show. CJ.
oh, is
So,
that so?
but there you go. We already got a glimpse of what the show will hold. So, people on the show, if you haven't told your friends, family, colleagues that this is a wonderful show, you can tell that now. This show will be live for about 45, 50 more minutes, so they can obviously join. We will of course have some good fun, but I also wanted to explore the lesser known part of CJ's life, which is coaching and how he carved a path for himself. And here he is. So with that, let's get into the show a little bit. And CJ, I did promise to you that we will take more audience questions, but to get the show started, I have some questions of my own. So we
Please.
will probably start there, and then at some point, as these questions start pouring in. So,
Yeah.
which is also a reminder to the people on the show that let your questions start pouring in now itself. Normally, I request this at around 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the show, but
Uh,
this is a
An-
different show today.
Anshuman,
So,
you've done lots of foreplay. Let's jump into it.
so good. Okay, so first up, maybe a easy question, but surely you didn't grow up starting or thinking that you will be a comedian, right? So when did this start? When did you start thinking about it seriously, or was it a progression? Was it a trigger? How did this happen? At least the time that when you chose to become a comedian, that too in
Yeah.
English language,
Yeah.
not many were thinking about that. So when, how,
So,
where?
so I had never seen stand-up comedy until 3 months before I started doing it. I started quite late in life. I had taken a huge loan and gone to Oxford University to do my MBA. It took me 4 years of working to pay back those loans. Then I took a sabbatical. I went to the Edinburgh Festival and I saw these guys doing stand-up comedy for the first time. And I was like, wow. I mean, here was a guy with a drink in one hand and a microphone in the other and just having fun. And that was his job. So that's the time I told myself, listen, I've got to do this. And 3 months later, I was on stage for the first time. I did 250 shows in my first 10 months and 700 in my first 3 years in London and the UK. And in fact, after the first year, I went broke. And then I used to work in a recruitment firm in the day and perform at night. And then one of my clients was a company that did executive coaching. So I qualified as a coach with them. And I would tell them, I'm free on so and so days, get me work. And they would say, okay, Google wants to run this workshop in Ireland, Nike wants to do this in Amsterdam. So with them, I trained these 50 odd blue chips. And that's what supported my comedy habit. But I'm saying it as, like it is a drug habit, which it really felt like. But the honest truth is, when I started doing stand up comedy, I was actually debating between doing a bartending course and getting into stand up comedy. But the bartending course that I looked at, they only taught you how to mix the drinks. They didn't teach you how to juggle the glasses. And I remember thinking to myself, well, if I can't juggle the glasses, I'm never going to get laid. So that's why I got into stand up comedy. And that was 18 years ago. And in the last 18 years, I can't tell you how many times. Well, how many times I wish I had taken that bartending course. So,
I,
yeah,
I get
that's,
that. I get that.
you get that. Thanks a lot, man. Huh.
So like I'm sure the audience must have caught this, that many times, and CJ, many people have come on the show where I do ask a similar question, that how did you stumble upon the profession? And I
Yeah.
do this to bust a little bit of a myth that this follows your passion myth that everybody has. There is a little bit element of profession and passion which comes together. Anything on that? Do you believe in follow your passion, or do you believe in follow your profession and then find the passion, or the other way around? What is your view on
You,
this?
Anshuman, when we spoke before this interview, you said, CJ, keep your answers brief. So I gave you a short answer in the first one. I always believe that you've got to find a balance. You need to feed the soul, but you need to feed the stomach as well. And the things that you need to do to feed the stomach, I'll finance you to do the things you want to do to feed the soul. Right? I mean, Shah Rukh Khan is a global superstar. Even he dances in weddings sometimes. So
Yes.
who are we? When I started doing stand up, I remember every day I used to get up at about, say, 10:30, 11, cook one meal for myself at 2 o'clock, get into some comedian's car at 4 in the afternoon to drive to some city. Often I would drive for 4 hours just to do 5 minutes or sometimes 10 minutes. The show would finish. I was nervous. I wouldn't eat. Sometimes, if the place was expensive, I couldn't afford the food there. I would get dropped off in the outskirts of London at 2 o'clock in the morning. I would pay the driver my share of petrol. I wasn't getting paid for any of these shows. And I would change 3 different buses. I couldn't afford a taxi. Sometimes waiting for 45 minutes in cold London winter. It would take me over 2 hours to get home. So I had spent from 4 in the afternoon to 4 in the morning to perform 10 minutes for no money. At the end of that year, I mean, I did this every single day for an entire year. At the end of that year, I had no money, no friends, no relationships, and no life. But every single comedy promoter in the country knew my name. And that's
Hmm.
where it started off. But even then, when I went broke, I had to work in the day and perform at night. But here's the important distinction. In my head, even though I was performing for 10 minutes at night and working for 8 hours a day, in my head, I was a comedian and the job was on the side. And it's only when I got to a point where I no longer needed to do stuff on the side that I went to comedy full time. But you've got to find that balance. It's fashionable now to say, oh, follow your passion, but passion doesn't always put food on the table. So there is no shame in saying that you've got to do other things to support yourself while you get there.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you put it this way. And coming from someone who has lived the journey makes it more meaningful, because sometimes today we find that people who haven't anywhere close to live the journey are willing to dole out that advice to anybody who might, and gullible people might fall prey to it. So this was the only serious part of the show, CJ. So, but there is somebody on the show whom I can't but bring him in. So Vikram, we'll try and bring you in earlier later, but thanks for being on the show. Uh, and again, a reminder: questions can start coming in as we speak.
Can can we ask Vikram if I can tell the story about him? Vikram is a close friend of mine. Just ask him if we can tell a very naughty story about him. He's a wonderful guy, runs a coaching company now, and does all this enlightening workshops for people in corporates. But so I used to be in a hostel in Delhi during college, and Vikram was our neighbor, and he's a couple of years younger to me. And I remember when he finished school and he was thinking about where to go for college, you know. So we told him, yeah, Vikram, in India, nobody will appreciate your talents. You've got here, they're looking for one class 12 mark sheet. You are this all round fantastic personality. You should go to America.
Hmm.
So Vikram said, yes, yes, I should go to America. He's a young boy at this point. So he went home and told his father, he says, Dad, I want to go to America. Now his dad was an army guy. He said, listen, boss, I don't have the money to send you to America. So this is not going to happen. Forget it. So Vikram comes back the next day, his dreams are all crushed. And then we told him, Vikram, you will get a full scholarship. Yeah, you are a genius. Who will not give you a full scholarship? So Vikram was like, yes, I am a genius. So he goes home and tells his father, I am a genius. Now, his father obviously knew that Vikram may not be a genius. And I'm saying this, he's the loveliest man I know. He's a great friend. So he said, I only need money for the SAT, SAT, and the TOEFL, that the test you need to do to get into college. So his father said, I'm not giving you, boss. So he comes back the next day saying, Daddy said he won't give me the money. I said, okay. On his birthday, he had been presented this tennis racket. So we said, you sell this racket. This poor guy, just finishing class 12, stood in the sun at M Block Market in GK for 3 hours trying to sell this racket. And he wasn't able to, so he could pay for his SAT. Came back, I think eventually joined DCAC, Delhi College of Arts and Commerce. But now, obviously, running a very successful business. I believe he's working with you guys as well. And the most wonderful, wonderful man with a great heart. So yeah, sorry, I went to the side there to just tell you a story because I noticed that Vikram was
No,
on.
no, but it gives us a window on in your life and of course Vikram's life, and he has given you permission. So yes, he has. So we had this permission, but yeah, fantastic. We have some comments coming in as well. So thank you, Sukrit.
Your
All
your
good.
door your doorbell rang, no, Anshuman? I think the vegetables have come. Sabzi aa gayi.
That's fine. They will drop it at the door these days. This is the one lesson we have all learned during pandemic life. If somebody rings the doorbell 2 3 times, they will drop whatever they have got at the door and go back. So, um, okay, so we touched upon a little bit about this profession and passion bit, CJ. But if we have to summarize this, that at what point do you think the hobby or passion becomes a profession? And using your example, and this one is insistent, so I will ask this question and go. But at what point does this passion becomes profession? And using your example, when did you realize that this is now a profession for you?
I might give a really short answer and then you won't be here and then there'll be awkward silence and they say 50th show, look what happened. No, go get your vegetables. I'll give the answer. So I think there isn't a fixed point when passion becomes profession. In fact, I still think of stand-up comedy as a hobby. I think the most important part is the kind of world we live in. You've got to be agile and you've got to be light on your feet. If each of us look back on our own lives and all the major changes that have happened in our own lives, I'm confident you will find that 90% of them were not planned. Right? So we spend all this time making plans, but things don't always go according to plan. So I think you've got to be light on your feet. I think passion becomes profession when you start getting paid enough that you don't have to do anything else. But even then, you've got to be flexible. I mean, I had been doing stand-up comedy for 15 years, and then COVID came, and suddenly my comedy income became zero. Because organizations can't be paying for comedians when they're firing people and cutting salaries. So if you're light on your feet, you adapt. That's when I said, okay, let me put a bit more focus on the coaching work. So I think that's really important. There isn't a fixed time. It's different for different people. Also, yeah, let me end this one at that. The other thing I wanted to say, I'll bring back later.
Oh, sure, sure. So, and the break was decent enough, and this was, guess what, an Amazon delivery boy, which which, and they are faster, so I was able to get back quickly. But I did catch your point around this. There is no trigger point for this passion and profession thing.
Yeah,
There will come a point, and for a performer or for an artist or like yourself, a stage performer, God forbid, if something like COVID happens, it can completely turn upside down anything that you've done for 15 years, or for some people even longer. And I've known and spoken to some people who literally the world completely changed. For us in the
yeah.
corporate world, we just pretend that the world changed. Actually, nothing has changed because we still do the same work, we still get the same money, some less, some more. Of course, there are other issues about jobs and all, but
I think
for us,
Anshuman,
life has
a
not
lot.
changed.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think a lot of it depends on your personal circumstances. Some of us sit in very privileged positions where, if we don't get income for a few months, it doesn't have that much of an impact on our lives. But there's so many people with EMIs and who are living, where the income just about meets their expenses. They have children, they have elderly parents, they have medical bills. Luckily for me, my lifestyle is so simple. I almost all my travel is paid for because I travel for work. I will buy one shirt that fits, pick up 5 colors. I'm done for 2 years. Fortunately, my parents and I, we live in our own home, so I don't pay rent. So even if I try, I'm not a shopper. I don't really have any. I'll eat out maybe once a week. I'm very happy eating at home. So even if I try, I cannot spend more than 30,000 rupees a month. So when your needs are sort of, or your expenses are slightly lower, then there's a lot less financial pressure on you.
Yeah.
And from a passion and profession point of view as well, then it allows you a lot more freedom to be able to, do the things you want to do, as opposed to saying, okay, you know what, I have so many bills to pay, so I'm going to do this. But I think the other thing is, unlike a lot of people who run businesses, as a comedian or a coach, you don't really have a fixed monthly outgoing expense, in terms of salaries. So I think when we look at things like COVID, we want to be conscious of the fact that some of us sit in very privileged positions and will never be able to truly understand the pressures that many others face.
Absolutely, and I'm sure all of us know people who are in that situation, and if we can't take lessons from them, then it's not a life worth living, because this is what we do. We learn from others, and thankfully, we are, like you said, in significantly privileged position that for several months, no income, we can still manage and keep the family afloat. On that somber note, somebody whose name I can't read on this, because LinkedIn is not showing up the name, but is challenging you a little bit. And no, not this one.
Life is what happens while we are busy
No, that
making
the same
yeah,
person has
yeah.
probably asked, don't you miss your MBA degree for a corporate job? Misusing your MBA degree. So you were, of course, a MBA from Oxford, but do you ever miss it?
So I'll be honest. At some point, I still have secretly, not even secretly, somewhere I still have this craving about working at a corporate.
Hmm,
In terms of, it was a life as a kid. I always wanted, as a kid, I wanted to like go to Harvard Business School and things like that. I suppose at that time Oxford didn't have a business school. And somewhere I still think in my head, should I apply to McKinsey and Company for a job? Uh, but now I think, what transferable skills do I really have? If I go to a strategy consulting house, what is my skill set? But I think I do get to satisfy that craving, because when I work as a coach, there is a lot that I bring to the table to many organizations. It's a different lens. And I think humor and comedy is a superpower when it comes to coaching, because it allows people to, at the senior level, you're not telling them any theory. And most people walk in thinking they know everything already. What's this outsider going to teach me about my business? I've been doing it for 30 years. So humor and my kind of background allows people to lower their guard. And all I'm doing is telling them, listen, why don't you just look at your work in your life through a slightly different lens? Humor me. And if you find any value from it, take that away. But from the point of view of the MBA, I don't think the MBA ever goes to waste. No knowledge or education goes to waste. Today, I run a session which is called A Comedian's Guide to Communication Strategy. That literally brings together my knowledge from the world of comedy and my knowledge from the world of business. And it finds that sweet spot in between. I will also say this. I think my MBA and the things that I learned during that have helped me incredibly in my career as a comedian. Because if you think about, it's show business, right? Half of it is the show and the other half is business.
correct.
So no, the MBA is definitely not wasted. uh, Oxford University doesn't obviously put me on the brochure saying, please come and spend 30,000 pounds on an Oxford MBA, you can be a comedian one day. But I think I am on their Wikipedia page as one of the distinguished alumni, or one of those whatever fancy terms they use. Obviously, they're really short on people, so they had to throw that in.
This. So now the questions are pouring in, CJ. So, and our common friend Vikram has a nice note for you. Thank you, Vikram. Uh, Wherever we go in life, it is always good to hear from friends. So we asked the MBA question. Uh, Manoj Rana has a more a comment, but I stand-up comedy is a great art and passion, but this art has lately become very, I think he meant awkward to watch. Lots of foul language is used to arouse laughter. So Manoj, you haven't been to any CJ show, so, so
Let me address that question. I know exactly what Manoj is saying. See, Manoj, firstly, comedy is very subjective, right? There's one comedian that one person may love and one comedian that another might not. So there are enough comedians who work completely clean, that you can watch people who work clean. what tends to happen is you've got to keep in mind that stand-up comedy is a very new art form as far as India is concerned, you know. So a comedian also goes through a process of evolution. So for example, I'll give you my process of evolution. When you first start, you want the confidence that you can make people laugh. So you're going to go for the easy joke. So the kind of joke I would do for an Indian audience, for example, is I live in Delhi. And as somebody who lives in Delhi, we struggle to understand the language people speak in Mumbai. You know, we call it bread, they call it pav. We call it pyaz, they call it kanda. We call it a servant quarter, they call it a 2 BHK. Right? So that's an easy joke. Anshuman, keep your mic on because if you're laughing, I want to hear you laugh.
Sure,
Yeah?
sure, sure.
Then we also do the kind of jokes that we know will be populist, which will get the easy laugh. So if I was abroad, the kind of joke I would do is, so for example, I was in Singapore, and front page of the newspaper, it says there was a pig on the street. Right? Nothing ever happens in Singapore. If there is a pig on the street, in Singapore, it becomes headline news. In Germany, it becomes a sausage. In America, it became the president of the United States of America. Right? Now, I know that's an easy laugh. Then what happens is, as comedians, we all do observational comedy. So just like you, we see the world, but we observe it differently. So one of the jokes I do is that I grew up in Calcutta. I remember taking driving lessons in London, and this instructor says, he says, you know, why don't you drive in a straight line? I said, listen, I grew up in Calcutta. I'm not used to it. Because in England, you drive on the left of the road. In Calcutta, we drive on what is left of the road. So that's sort of stage 2 of evolution. Then what happens is suddenly we find that we've got a microphone. We have an audience that is listening to us. So you get this sense of power. And especially in India, as a young comic, you're like, oh my God, I can stand on stage and say all these foul words and people clap at it. Now, what tends to happen is the first 2 or 3 times you abuse, the audience is like, oh my God, look, yeah, he said that on stage. Oh my God. And they laugh. But after you heard it 2 or 3 times, you're like, okay, now where's the joke? The problem that happens in our country is that our audience is so large that an audience member who will listen to this foul language and then say, okay, you know what, I've heard that, we've got the fact that you can abuse on stage. Now let's be funny. So that guy evolves and demands better from a comedian. But the comedian isn't forced to raise his or her game because another audience has come and taken that audience's place. So he can still go on doing the same stuff and people will laugh at it. But eventually what you find out, and this is the first line in my book, that stand-up comedy, or any art form for that matter, is an outward expression of an inward journey. Eventually you're forced to look inwards because you're in a profession that has no rules, no boundaries, no guidelines, no social norms. You've got to think to yourself, what do I think is funny? What are my values? What are the things I will not joke about? And then your audience finds you. You no longer care about who is in the room because the people who like your stuff will stay there. The other guys will automatically weed themselves out. If you think of the more famous comedians, Russell Peters, Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, they're not going to change what they do depending on who's in the room. I mean, Chris Rock might if Will Smith is in the room. But so all I'm saying is you don't need bad language to be funny, but I understand why some people do it, but they're just in an earlier stage of their evolution,
Of
you know.
finding.
So that's a very long answer to a very
No, no.
short question.
And I was trying to relate it to what, at my own expense, some corporate life as well. Like, for example, at work, some people, like, including myself, I've been called, I'm a very good people manager. And it comes up all the time. And at some point, I'm saying, like, look, I deliver what is required. There is work I do. I'm not just that, people manager that you praise and stop at. So it is similar to saying that, people see only that part, and then it takes a while for the comedian to maybe evolve. And also, maybe in my case, like, I have to evolve into somebody more
So
effective and more professional.
So, in fact, relating to this, to the corporate life, I tell exactly this same story when I run my session, A Comedian's Guide to Communication Strategy, a
Hmm.
marketing strategy, content strategy. Where am I trying to get to? Today, as an organization, sometimes you are trying to please everybody. You're going for every market, every product, every customer, every price point, right? But eventually, I mean, you're a people manager, Anshuman. When you're
Yeah,
interviewing somebody, if they're bullshitting you, if they're lying to you, can you tell?
yeah, absolutely. All the time.
Exactly. It's the same thing. When you are lying to somebody, they can tell. So if you're
Absolutely.
telling people things that you think they like to hear or want to hear, but is not authentic, you don't believe it, they can tell. So whether it's a comedian on stage or a brand, you have to be authentic and true to who you are and what you can offer, and have the confidence that your audience can find you.
No, fantastic. And you did mention the book, so I just have a reminder for everybody. The book is, of course, called Naked.
Should I
And
take
this
my
is
clothes off?
no, no, not the cover is quite adequate with a little bit more hair at the time. And uh,
Thanks, bro. By the
CJ
way,
mentioned.
can you just show that cover a little better? I just want to tell you that this is a photograph taken from a live show at the Soho Theatre in London, and I basically in this show I do take my clothes off one layer at a time. But what's interesting about the cover it is that firstly it is not photoshopped at all, but it has been strategically cropped at the right place just before the love handles start.
So it only takes a person like CJ to mention all that, but even for the bodybuilder, this is a fantastic body to have. But I wanted to mention that
Are you flirting with me?
some other day, some other day. But Russell Peters is mentioned, and he's on the cover of the book. So Russell Peters, of course, many of you know, so, heartwarming, inspiring, and hilarious. So thank you, Russell.
Okay, Anshuman, stop promoting it. Let's chat. Let's take questions.
I have to. I actually love the book, and after Vikram told me that he has a photograph in this book as well, I've been reading it more to find where Vikram is. So we'll let him know. But some more questions, and to my audience, and of course, this show is also going live to CJ's audience as well. So the what we're trying to cover, of course, is carving your own path. So this path was not there. CJ has carved his path. There is struggle, there is joy, there is satisfaction, and we also covered briefly the part where, when passion becomes profession, and while the passion is becoming profession, you still have to put food on the table. It might be less food, it might be bread and jam only, but you still need that. So I thought I'll give a quick summary of what we've discussed till now. But one more question, and I'm keeping my word, CJ. I'm taking more audience
Please.
questions.
Yeah.
So Rini Chatterjee has a question. Rini, first
Yeah.
of all, thank you for coming to the show. First, maybe when you are on stage, which is often, at what point during an audience interaction do you know that you have them? And a key tip on any to ace public speaking, of course, especially for introverts. So yeah, very good question. Thank you, Rini.
Okay. At what point do you know you have them? You know, Rini, in the first 30 seconds to 1 minute, you know as a professional whether it's going to be an easy show or whether you're going to have to work at it. Because your first couple of jokes, as a comic at least, are sort of feeler jokes, taster jokes. You will always start with something really strong because you want to immediately make a strong impression. We live in an age of limited attention span, so you want to get them immediately. And if they don't give you enough of a response on that, then you know that you're going to have to work really hard at it. So with comedy, it's a joke. If you're doing a speech, for example, you could start with something like, they say that the best speeches are short ones. So, as Elizabeth Taylor told each of her 8 husbands, I won't keep you long, right? So, you should get a laugh at that. And if they give you a weak response, then you know it's going to take some time. I'm going to come back to the second part of your question on tips on public speaking. Uh, that being said, I want to rebut myself, because what happens is over the course of time, you realize that different audiences enjoy things differently. For example, one day I was doing a college show, and I'm talking about London, and people were banging the tables, cheering, clapping, hooting. Next day, I did this, very upper class, sophisticated show, and people were just smiling. And I thought, oh my God, this show is going really badly. because I had the marker of the previous night. When people came to me afterwards and said, oh, we really loved it, that's when I realized that different people enjoy things differently. So the test of an audience is not how much they're laughing or clapping, but when you pause, how much silence there is. Then you've got them in the palm of your hand, listening to every single word. I mean, I remember doing a gig in Vegas. I was in this 2,000-seater auditorium, and just before the punchline, you can hear a pin drop, and then you drop the punchline and the roof goes off. I have to tell you this, it is a power rush, because it feels like this immense sense of power that you've got 2,000 people hanging on to every word. Now, in terms of tips for public speaking, couple of things. One is body language makes a big difference, right? So if you imagine what your personal space is, if somebody came and stood next to you and that would make you uncomfortable, close your eyes and expand it to fill the size of the room that you're performing in. When you walk on stage, you will walk with a demeanor that makes you feel like I'm the king. There's a wonderful story of this film called Mughal-e-Azam, which was made over 50 years ago in India. And in those days, the actor who was playing the role of the emperor, he was given a pair of shoes that cost 25,000 rupees, which in today's sort of money would be like 25 lakhs or 2.5 million if you live abroad. And he was asked that, do you really need to spend this much money on a pair of shoes, for the guy who's playing the emperor? And the producer says, no, I don't, K. Asif. He says, but when my actor knows that he is wearing a pair of shoes that cost 25,000 rupees, the way he will walk, that is what I want to capture. So that's one part about the body language. Two, the greatest confidence you can have from public speaking or when you go to speak is knowing that you have the ability to say, I don't know. Today, if somebody asks me a question and I don't have the answer to that question, I will say, I'm sorry, I'm not best qualified or well informed enough to answer that question. Any audience will respect you far more for that than for trying to wing it and sort of just make up an answer to it. So stick to the things that you know, talk about what you know, and relax. Everybody knows public speaking is difficult. If you make a mistake, it's no problem. Be in the moment and say, you know what, I'm really nervous, so don't mind if I fumble a bit. The audience will warm to you instantly. In fact, talking about questions, sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but this story is worth it, Anshuman.
Sure.
There's a wonderful story of Albert Einstein, and he used to go around giving all these speeches at universities. And one day, his driver, who was driving him, said that, you go and give the same speech everywhere. I can also give this speech. What's difficult about it? So Einstein says, sure, why don't you give it a shot? So Einstein wears the driver's uniform and he drives up. Of course, in those days, people didn't know what he looked like. So the driver gets on stage and he delivers this fabulous speech, word for word like Einstein would, gets a standing ovation. And he's about to get off stage when one guy says, sir, I have a question. And he asks this really complicated question about astrophysics. And when he finishes asking the question, this guy looks at him and he says, that question, it's so easy, even my driver can answer it. So he points at Einstein who answers the question. So I hope that answers your question, Rini, and I'm going to give it back to Anshuman.
Sure. Thanks, Rini. This was good question as well, because it got us to a space where we can get something from CJ in terms of public speaking, which wasn't, of course, the plan. But thank you very much.
By the way, Rini is being very humble with that question. She runs her own PR agency, which is fantastic, and she's a fabulous writer and public speaker. So
that also proves the point that people who have already achieved something are always hungry and curious to know more. CJ,
yeah.
So always, and thanks, Rini. Vikram is being naughty, so we'll put his question, but up to you. This question might need a context, but do you have anything to say? This is the first for me. I'm taking a topical question in the show, but this is a different show, so permitted.
Why do you think Veer Das's to India's pissed the politicians off? What he said was true, wasn't it? This is a 45-minute answer. you know, because when it comes to humor and offense, it is so subjective. You know, as comedians, when we do stand-up comedy in many different countries in the world. So, for example, if you go to Singapore, the first thing they will say is, "Whatever you do, do not mention Lee Kuan Yew, right? Who is their father of the nation." And there are two sides to what you do in stand-up, right? One, you've got to make a decision based on your own value system. So, for example, if there are elderly people in the audience, I will not pick on them. You know, I will not make fun of them because that is my value system. The second thing you've got to do is based on the reality of the space that you live in. Now, for example, if you look at Charlie Hebdo, when it happened, you know, these people, was it the Netherlands, where
Yeah.
they essentially made cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad and very inappropriate cartoons. And somebody went to their office and they gunned these guys down. Now, the question is this. You can argue till kingdom come and debate, should this have happened or should it not have happened? Right? What is ideal, what is not? But the reality is you can't expect to be surprised. Right? You know that if you do certain kind of jokes, it is going to upset people. So you've got to take a decision as a performer that is it more important for me to make the point that I'm making, right? Or is my personal safety more important for me? It's different for different people. You know, they say that humor is like a rubber sword. You can make a point without drawing any blood. So, yes, humor is an incredibly powerful way to bring about social change, you know, to be able to talk about things that one may not be able to talk about otherwise, or to bring attention to it. But often people say, oh, as a comedian, you should do that. I disagree with that completely. You know, different people have different styles of comedy. You know, some people make an impact by getting on stage and talking about things that they want to change. For me, I go to hospitals. You know, I perform for free for children with cancer, for adults with cancer, you know, or do fundraiser shows. So, I mean, this isn't, I want to sort of pause this over here, Anshuman, because this is a very long conversation
Yeah.
and it's not something that can be answered instantly.
And like most difficult topics, there is no yes or no. There is a lot of context, of course, but if the
Because you
question
know,
was,
actually, to be honest, Anshuman, I remember maybe 6-8 months ago, I got on stage at a show in Gurgaon. I was hosting it. There was about 30 or 40, maybe 25 new comics who were performing. And I still remember one of them, the audience was, I'd say, average age 25. One of them got on stage and he said something which I found as a comedian deeply offensive, right? It was something that he said against, I don't even remember who the comic was, some young chap. It was, it was a religious joke, right, against a deity. Sorry, let me rewind that. It wasn't a religious joke. It was just an offensive statement. There was no intention to be funny. There was no intention to crack a joke, right? And even that young audience, you know, supposedly, as they say, woke nowadays, booed this guy. And I asked the organizer of the show afterwards, I said, you know, why are these guys saying things like this? And they said, oh, you know, they saw this other comedian who said these offensive things and became famous. So, or at least what people considered offensive. And
yeah,
so they think that this is a shortcut to fame. Now, if you're going to get on stage and say things with the intention to provoke, and then people will get provoked and you can't control how they respond to that. So I think there's two sides to it. I mean, as a comedian, obviously I want people to be able to get on stage and have the ability to have free speech, but and do jokes about whatever they like. But if you're going to get on stage with the intention, see, offense also has to do with intent, right? I mean, today, most of my shows, are closed doors shows where nothing is recorded. Okay. Now, in a room, people understand my persona, they understand the context, and they understand my intent. Now, if you were to record one tiny clip of that and stick it on the internet, people who were not in that room uh,
Will not.
may not get the context and may get offended. So it's I mean, as you can see, this is a 2 or 3 hour debate, and there are so many different aspects to it.
Layers.
So great question. Uh, there isn't a short answer to that, I'm afraid.
We'll move on. Still taking audience questions, and Anand will kill us if we don't take this question. So, any tips for those who write text posts on LinkedIn? And how do you include humor, comedy in text post?
So, Anand, firstly, the gentleman who's interviewing me is a LinkedIn top voice. So, I think that question should be directed at him.
But
With
he's
regard,
not funny, right? So the
well, he is still a top voice. So, Anand, I've actually written an article. You'll find it on my LinkedIn about how to be funny or how to be known for a good sense of humor. I'm also writing on Medium. So, if you go there, you should be able to find this article. So
sure.
I won't give you the full answer now, but there are 10 tips on how you can be uh, funnier while writing or speaking.
Fantastic. Murthy SN has a slightly long question, but let's give it a shot. Great to listen, Papa CJ, on the show. Thank you. And find a question to Papa CJ. How come? Hmm, how
Okay,
much?
let
This
me
is how
answer
what
that.
happens when you don't have glasses on.
No problem. No problem. Let me answer that question. First, how do you find synergy between your various roles as a comedian, executive coach, speaker, etc.? So for me, it's quite simple, Murthy. My purpose is to uplift others and help them be better versions of themselves. If you look at the banner at the top of my LinkedIn, it has one line. It says, "I make people feel better." So for me, everything I do fits under that banner. Comedy allows me to bring laughter to them. My happiness project lets me take laughter to places where people need it the most, whether it's hospitals, people's homes. The coaching helps people feel better about themselves and be better versions of themselves. Very often, uh, I meet a lot of people when I'm traveling, and I spend 1 hour with them, and I find that people say to me, at least, that they get a lot of value out of that 1 hour conversation, because Stephen Covey talks about something which is called a trim tab. Now, a trim tab is a tiny little lever that controls a small rudder that controls the larger rudder of a ship. So,
Hmm.
if in that conversation I am able to give people a trim tab moment, which is to move that lever by little 1%, the entire direction of where that boat ends up changes. And I find that people tell me that they are able to get that from a conversation with me. So that's how I sort of bring synergy between all these things. Also, humor isn't, like I've already said, is a superpower when it comes to coaching. And I think essentially everything that I'm doing is the management of energy. You know, management of energy to try and create a better, happier future for the people that I work with. With regard to the first part of your question, how much of life is serendipity and how much of life is a series of planned steps? I mean, I think a lot of it is serendipity, but you still have to make plans. You've still got, like they say, if you don't roll the dice, you won't get a six. Getting the six is probably serendipity, but you've got to roll the dice. That's in your hands. There's a wonderful story about this person who used to be very devoted to God, lived a very pious life. And all his life, he had only one prayer. He said, "God, I want you to make me win the lottery." And his whole life went, never won the lottery. So he dies and he meets God, and he tells God that, I've lived such a wonderful life. I've done good karma. I've served other people. I've been a good human being. I only asked you for one thing, which was to win the lottery. Why didn't you make me win the lottery? So God looks at him and he says, "Well, the least you could have done is bought a lottery ticket." Right? So
I
yeah, I think make your plans, make the effort, but be agile enough to not stick to your plans when circumstances changes. You may have planned to go to a destination. I mean, I was the son of a tea planter. Well, I'm still the son of a tea planter, not was, who had these plans to go to Oxford, do an MBA, and have this corporate career. I was miserable in my job. But if I kept looking there, I wouldn't have seen all the other windows that opened up for me. So you've got to be light on your feet and be willing to take those chances. There's a wonderful quote by John Burroughs. He says, "Leap, and the net will appear." Very often we're just too scared to leap because we don't see a net. But sometimes you've got to leap first. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
That does, and I know Murthy a little bit, so and he's in a similar role like me, so I can see his predicament a little bit because sometimes in corporate world, what happens, and mostly actually not sometimes, is that you make some plans, elaborate plans for the financial year, and then 2 months, 3 months down the line, some major upheaval happens, some corporate change happens, something
But
happens, and
Anshuman, I just want to interrupt you. Where I find a lot of people unhappy in a corporate space, especially, I mean, if we have a large Indian audience here, is, we are grown up with a certain mindset. We are brought up with a certain mindset to continue running on the treadmill, right? You
absolutely.
have to get a promotion, you have to get a better job, you have to get more money, whereas you might be miserable in that job. And very often it's about being able to say, Are, look how well he is doing. Who cares, right? And how much is enough? Today you could have enough money to to not have to work for the rest of your life, but you're still trying to go higher and higher and higher and higher. Nobody actually pauses to think how much is enough. Your only true wealth is your time. And as I've always said, comparison is the thief of joy. We're living in a world where we're constantly comparing ourselves with somebody else, you know, and we're living in a world where a lot of people get their sense of self worth from external validation. With social media, it's how many shares, how many likes, how many, whatever else it is, which is just this generation or our generation's equivalent of in our parents' generation, where people used to say, Log kya kahenge? What will people say? What do you think
Mm.
social media is? It's the same thing. You're still
Yep.
seeking external validation from somebody else. So I think it's very important, I know we're coming to the end of the hour, when we say carve your own path, there is no right way. Declare war on the word should. Oh, you should do this. This is how you should live your life. Oh, by so and so age, you should have achieved this. As a girl, this is what you should wear. This is when you should go out. I mean, there is no right way. You've got to carve your own path. I think that is very critical, because people keep telling you, oh, this is how you should do, this is the way to do it. And in every career today, as a comedian, as somebody in business, as somebody in a job, there will be people who start after you and become far more successful in worldly terms faster than you. Stop looking at them. It's the fastest source of unhappiness is to compare. Just live your own path, figure out what your own values are, and stop chasing a definition of success that has been defined by somebody else. Figure out what your definition is and follow that path, and there you will find joy. I mean, I've said this before. Today, I could be sitting in Los Angeles shooting a sitcom, but every morning, including this morning, I get to go to my local cafe, spend an hour with my mom and dad, and have a cup of coffee. For me, that is far more valuable than performing on any stage in the world or getting any amount of money. Those are my values, right? So, I mean, if this audience was to take anything away, just take that away. There is no right way to succeed or right way to live your life. You've got to define it based on your value system.
And that only as an individual we all can do. It will never come from comparing ourselves with anybody else, including in this case Papa CJ as himself. I'm sure many of in the audience might want to become or might think that they can crack better jokes than CJ. Please.
No, I've seen who's in the audience. Not a chance. I'm kidding.
And what is stopping you? Go ahead and try, right? So go ahead and try. And this I get a lot because at work also, CJ, there is more time wasted. People telling me, and I could have done better, this, that, and I keep saying that, look, this is a very safe environment. You go ahead and try. If you can do better, I will give you that role.
Yeah.
For a large team, you can always do that. And 9 out of 10, or maybe 9.9 out of 10, they don't try because it's very easy to compare, but very, very difficult to put that first foot up forward.
In,
So
in fact, in fact, what you consider success may not lead you to joy. Today, one of the organizations I'm working with, one of their biggest challenges is that when they promote people, you see, when you're at this level, you're managing the business. When you're at this level, you're managing the people who manage the business. That is a different skill set. And just because you're good at this doesn't mean you're going to be good at this. So these guys get promoted from here to here. And now they're in a space where from being a top performer at this level, you're an average performer here because you don't do this well and you may not even enjoy it. So be careful what you
wish for.
aspire towards. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I I know we have only 5 minutes, but I do want to have this question, and you know your journey. And I understand and I know that the move to executive coaching did not happen overnight or wasn't a trigger. But how did that happen, and what makes you stick to that journey? Uh, from the comedian part to the, not that you're moved fully, of course, you get revenue from
See,
both sides. What happened?
Anshuman, I'm not stuck to anything.
Hmm.
I'm fortunately privileged enough to be in a position where I get to do the things that I enjoy. My plate isn't full. I'm not working 365 days a year. In fact, I don't want to work 365 days a year. So right now, I'm enjoying both. It's not a shift at all. It's just another string to my bow. I
Hmm.
decided to give it more attention when COVID began. And now I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the coaching. I'm enjoying the stand up. Both of them fit with my purpose. Do I love doing coaching? Absolutely. Does it compare to the stand up? Not a chance. The high of being on stage is another level. You crack a joke and get people laugh. I mean, on Wednesday, I was in Bangalore doing a corporate show, and the spontaneity of having an audience in the room, that interaction to connect one dot from the other, something somebody said 5 minutes ago to something somebody said now, it's magic. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy both of them. I haven't shifted from anything to the other. I'm still exploring different things. I'm still having multiple conversations, and I'm hoping I get the opportunity to work with many more wonderful folks and try many other different things. I don't feel the need to fit into any box. I'm not a comedian. I'm not a coach. I'm not an author. I'm Papa CJ. You know.
Fantastic. Couple of people have mentioned what is the secret to the name Papa CJ, so that I can say read the book.
Yes.
So this is
So
a
I
good.
wait. Let me answer that. Firstly, yes, you will have to read the book to find out. But I'll give you one answer to it. When I started performing, my first 700 shows were in the UK. And I was the only Indian comedian in the UK. This is 2004. I
Okay.
always wanted to represent India in a positive light.
Hmm.
One of the first lines I wrote, can I use foul language on this, Anshuman?
Go ahead.
May
I
I?
know the line. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the first lines I wrote was, don't mess with us Indians. Because we come from the land of the Kama Sutra, we can fuck you in more ways than you can count. So CJ's initials for my name, which I've been called since I was 16. And I think subconsciously, I'll say this in Hindi, I thought to myself, यार अंग्रेजों को भी लगना चाहिए उनका कोई बाप है. So the English translation for those who don't speak in Hindi is that the English also should believe that they have a daddy, so to say. So I think secretly in my head, I used to get a kick when people used to say "papa, papa." So, but in hindsight, I know why it works. I didn't think of it much when I thought of the name. Easy to remember, catchy, works as a brand. And if ever anybody is going to come to try and pick a fight with Papa CJ, you'll only find Papa CJ in a comedy club where I have security. And this has happened. I've had people try to stab me after a show, and
Oh,
I have performed at gunpoint in South Africa as well. So, yeah.
so on that note, I think on the gunpoint part, I am scared enough, and we will end the show. But not before one of the finest compliments I have had, courtesy your support, CJ. So thank you, Ayush. There is no way to measure a TRP, but like I said, and CJ also said earlier, we are in this to make sure that we can, or not make sure, but at least help people as much as we can. This was fantastic because you all had great questions, and CJ was generous with his time and wisdom. So that makes it a great show. So do turn up on
Should
other
we
shows.
should we raise the TRP? It's only 20 minutes left. I'm gonna take my clothes off. Let's do this.
This is it. So I'll make a clip.
naked.
Yeah. So I wish you got CJ to do this. But thank you very much. I hope this was rewarding show to everybody who joined, and those who could not join live. Of course, this is there recorded and will be available. And thank you, CJ. Thank you very much once again on behalf of the audience, my own self, and of course, making sure that this was a fantastic show. So thank you very much. And
My
with
pleasure.
that,
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I will end the show. Thank you very much. Bye bye.